Well, for more, we can speak now to Olivier Marty, who teaches European economics at the University of Paris. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Could I just start by asking you, what are the main reasons for which the Russian economy has fallen into recession, in your opinion?
Well, there are many reasons to that. I think the very first one is the impact of the Western sanctions against Russia, both the US and the European sanctions, which have hit individuals, trade sectors, and also the financial sector very, very deeply. The second reason for Russia being into a recession is the impact of the heightened interest rates by the Russian central bank, a rise that was decided because of the falling ruble at the start of the year. A third reason, of course, has to do with the declining active population, as hundreds of thousands of people, of men, are being drafted, and another hundreds of thousands of others are actually leaving the country. So this makes a clear and frank recession with months ahead that are going to be more difficult.
Yeah, well, with regards to the Western sanctions, I mean, there were concerns perhaps they weren't effective enough because for several months, Russia said it was doing much better than the countries that had sanctioned it. Do you think there was any truth in that?
Well, if you look at the aggregate figures, it's not completely wrong. The impact of the war in Ukraine, that is the global impact via sanctions or rising energy prices, is quite the same in Russia and in most European economies. At least the trend is very, very similar. Yet, I really think that one shouldn't doubt about the efficacy of sanctions. They clearly hit the Russian economy very, very hard. Those are the hardest sanctions that the European Union, for one, decided against a foreign country, and particularly the sanctions on the financial sector, which imply, among other things, really the cutting off the Russian financial system from the Western financial system, really have an impact. And in the months ahead, it's going to be even more complicated still. And the macroeconomic policy at the Russian level is going to be very complicated because there will be rising inflation and another pressure on the central bank to rise its interest rates. And the public deficit is going to increase very much. And at the same time, the Russian government will struggle to find financing from abroad, both public and private. It will have to turn towards allies that are actually less and less numerous.
Indeed. And of course, unemployment not doing too badly, just around the 4% mark, according to the latest figures from Russia. So perhaps that's the result of so many people being deployed to the front line. Is that perhaps one of the reasons why there are not a large number of people looking for work right now there in Russia, though?
Yes, indeed. I think, well, first of all, you have to take the Russian statistics with caution. And there are some statistics that the Russian regime is likely to trick a little bit for political reason, be it with a clear effect or not. I'm thinking especially of the Russian exchange rate, which is very important, and also the employment figures. So that's the first point. The second point is indeed that the active population in Russia is likely to shrink, and so the unemployment rate, which looks at the number of employed people on the active population, remains quite good. But actually, it's also because many people have left the labor force, and so the social situation is dire.
Indeed. And I just want to ask you, I mean, longer term, the damage to Russia looks more severe in many ways than what's happened in these last couple of quarters, because Russia's lost some key markets that I'd be surprised, perhaps you think differently, but I'd be surprised if it gets them back anytime soon.
Well, yes, the Russian economy crucially depends on the exports of raw materials, especially oil and gas. The price of oil and gas have, of course, risen dramatically in the first half of the year, but the price of gas, for example, has been declining lately. So has the price of oil, because Russia is trying to sell oil to allies at a discount rate. And so this is going to affect the revenues of the Russian regime, and also the global quantity of those raw materials being exported is going to narrow, and especially on gas, because it's very hard to diversify the gas exports because of the pipelines that exist. Whereas with oil, you can always reshuffle the production towards other clients. So that's one reason, and another reason is that the supply bottlenecks and the imports of the Russian economy are going to be very much disturbed. And as I said earlier, the inflation outlook is going to worsen because as many people are drafted, this will create labor shortages and possibly rise in wages, which is going to fuel inflation, and so will, of course, the supply bottlenecks that I mentioned. And at the same time, if you look at the public deficit of the Russian regime and its inability to finance itself very easily, then you're going to have a mismatch in the macroeconomic policy making, which is going to probably aggravate the economic outlook in Russia.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. Olivier Marty at the University of Paris. Thank you very much indeed.